Lies of P is one of the most recent installments to the Soulslike genre. Not only does it have intense ass-clenching moments, but it also builds up a strong story through its character developments and storytelling. So in today's video, I wanted to answer the question, is Lies of P one of the greatest Soulslike games ever released, or is it a flop? Let's dive into the video and find out. This video is going to be split up into two different sections. The first being my experience playing through Lies of P and what each chapter was about and what I did. The second part is going to be my review of the game and my opinion on it. Lies of P has a total of 11 chapters, with different styles of enemies and bosses. Chapter 1 starts with a blue butterfly smashing itself into Pinocchio's chest, gaining him consciousness. Complete the tutorial and choose your class. I decided to go with the Dexterity class, which would give me a weapon called Wintry Rapier. Like all weapons in Lies of P, it comes in two different parts, the blade and handle. This is because Lies of P's weapon crafting system allows you to combine weapons you grab into a brand new weapon. This is one of Lies of P's most unique systems. With my newly acquired weapon, I'd now leave the train cart I was in and find myself located at the Central Krat station. Here, I'd learn more controls like the combat and dodge controls. I'd continue to work my way through the train station, attempting to get more comfortable with these controls of the game. Whilst running around, I noticed all of these blue glowing items on the ground. These items could be picked up and could be things from story notes, all the way to items I can throw at anything I may encounter. I would keep moving through the station until I would finally experience my first death, at the hands of a police officer puppet wielding a baton. This would quickly remind me that I'm playing a Souls-like game, not a game designed for you to have fun playing. I would work my way back to the puppet and have my revenge. With the defeat of the puppet, I'd receive the Krat Central Station main entrance key. This would allow me to finally leave the train station. I'd work my way back over to the main entrance and use the key on the door, unlocking the door and allowing me to finally leave. The first thing I'd be introduced to once leaving the station would be a stargazer. This terminal would act the same way a campfire does in Elden Ring, allowing you to level up using Ergo and travel to different locations. It'd also be where I'd be returned to when I die. And as you can probably guess, I died a lot during this game. I would now continue my slaughter of puppets whilst working my way through the city of Krat, fighting puppet after puppet until I would eventually meet a wandering merchant. In most Souls-like games, wandering merchants tend to stock pretty average loot. But in Lies of P, even average loot can sometimes be the difference between defeating a boss and getting your ass clapped right back to the stargazer. I decided not to buy anything from this merchant, but he would become helpful later on. Just up from the wandering merchant, I'd get to enter my first boss room. I walked up to the gate and interacted with it, smashing it open with my mechanical arm. I'd now be introduced to the robotic clown known as the Parade Master. My battle with the Parade Master went how you would expect it to, with me doing light attacks, doing decent damage, and learning the clown's moveset. I would also be introduced to what the Lies of P community refers to as unblockable. This is where the boss or enemy glows red and charges up for a heavy attack. Now that isn't unblockable, but it sure is hard to block, with you needing to pretty much block at the perfect time. After dealing enough damage, I would destroy the clown's face, causing his attack style to change. It would now be way more aggressive. It would chase me around the boss arena, swinging its club, and doing longer combos. Something I also forgot to mention is whenever you don't get a perfect block, you would still take some damage, but his health would be recovered by damaging the enemy. Eventually, despite my best efforts, the clown would manage to kill me, but for my first attempt, I felt I did a good job. My second attempt would be different. This time, I was ready for its moves. I attacked in the gaps in its attacks, dealing as much damage as I could, whilst trying not to get my ass clapped back to the stargazer. Eventually, I destroyed the clown's face yet again. This time, I managed to keep my distance and strike in between the combos, giving me my chance to defeat the Parade Master. For defeating the Parade Master, I'd receive a quartz and the Parade Leader's Ergo. Both of these items would be very helpful in the future. I would now continue to run through Krat until finally making it to the Krat Hotel. Once there, I'd interact with the door. It would ask me who I am. Here is where I'd make my first choice, about if I would choose to lie or tell the truth. I decided to lie, say that I'm a human. The door would tell me that according to the Grand Covenant's 4th law, puppets cannot lie. But for some reason I can. I also learned that even after 14 years of schooling, I can't read for shit. Your springs are reaching. Reaching. The security system would now grant me access to Hotel Krat, and that would be the end of chapter 1. Before starting chapter 2, you get to finally be introduced to Sophia. You and her talk for a bit. The conversation ends with her requesting we go and find Geppetto, Pinocchio's creator. And being the absolute chat I am, I agree. But before heading out, I'd make a stop over at the weaponsmith, where I'd be given my first Legion arm. Legion arms act as another weapon in your arsenal, but they have a limited amount of uses before you must use a Stargazer to get more charge in them. I would also have a quick chat with Antonia, where she'd give me a new taunt and set of clothes. Now that I had talked with everyone in the hotel, I decided to go and find Geppetto, so I headed out. Chapter 2 starts on Elysian Boulevard entrance. Here I'd start to work my way further into the city of Krat, battling and defeating more and more puppets along my way. Throughout the game, there are also red velvet looking boxes. These boxes usually contain new items that can be equipped to Pinocchio to increase defense and resistance to debuffs. Eventually, after a lot of running and climbing of ladders, I would see a puppet that was larger than most of the other puppets. These puppets acted as chiefs, not as strong as bosses, but far stronger than a regular puppet. Here is where I would experience my first death in chapter 2. I ran up behind the puppet, hoping I'd be able to backstab the puppet, but it turns out that this wasn't an option, so I had to resort to trying to use light and charge attacks. Eventually, I got a pulse cell back, and I thought I was saved. That was until he knocked me off the building and I died for fall damage. Thankfully, I dropped some shortcut ladders on my way to that location, and I got back to that puppet in no time and I had my vengeance. I wouldn't come across another challenging opponent until I came face to face with another police puppet with a baton. But this one felt stronger than the one I challenged in chapter 1. Thankfully though, I wasn't too concerned as this puppet used all the same moves as the first one. And because I had built up a bit more confidence with the controls of the game, I managed to defeat it first try. Eventually, I would make it to a shut gate. I'd go over and interact with it and enter through it. I'd run across the bridge until I encountered this guy wearing a donkey mask. Odd sense of style for the puppet apocalypse, but then again, who am I to judge? I ran up to the donkey man that was screaming at a carriage and began talking with him. Once he found out I was a puppet, he decided I was not allowed to leave and we began to fight. My first attempt at this little boss fight went surprisingly well, with me almost defeating the mad donkey, but because I had played so aggressively and not focused on defending myself enough, I had taken so much damage and I had no pulse cells left, and I ended up losing. My second attempt played the same way, but this time I managed to just defeat the donkey man, but it was still a very close battle. Geppetto got out of the carriage and talked to Pinocchio. After the conversation, I received the Krat City Hall key and the Enigma assembly tool. I continued to move on, and after a bit more running, I had arrived at the final boss fight of chapter 2. The Scrapped Watchman fight starts off fairly easy, with mostly sluggish attacks, but even though they were sluggish, I was terrible at blocking them, so I ended up taking loads of damage for this. I realized throughout my multiple attempts at this boss fight that I was playing Lies of P far too aggressively in the boss fights, and this was leading to me being defeated more often than not. This is something I get better at as I played the game more. After doing enough damage to the Scrapped Watchman, the puppet would change into a phase 2 if you will. It charged itself up with electricity and became very aggressive, just like the parade leader did. Now not only could the puppet cause an electrical debuff, it also now had access to its grab attack. This is an attack that even after playing countless Souls-like games, I'm still never ready for and always manage to get grabbed. The process of me going into this fight time and time again went on for so long, with me getting more and more frustrated. That this was only the second boss fight. How was I struggling this much? Eventually, I managed to finally defeat the Scrapped Watchman. For defeating the Scrapped Watchman, I got an overcharged storage battery, a broken Hero's Ergo, a core, and a quartz. Before heading into chapter 3, I went over and talked to the blacksmith. She gave me another Legion arm. This one could be used to let out close range electrical attacks. I wasn't a fan of it, so I didn't use it very much. After that, I went up and had a quick chat with Geppetto. I learned about what was referred to as P organs. Here is where I'd be able to use my quartz to upgrade my P organ, allowing for new abilities and increase to current abilities. I decided it was now time for me to begin chapter 3, so I left Hotel Krat and teleported back to where I defeated the Scrapped Watchman. Chapter 3 picks up where chapter 2 ended, with it starting in Krat City Hall. I'd leave the city hall and end up at the workshop union entrance. It appeared that for chapter 3, I'd be working my way through the industrial part of Krat City. I'd fight puppets on rooftops and in alleyways, and even fight some more larger puppets, until I heard this phone ringing. I headed over and interacted with the receiver. It was some guy referring to himself as the King of Riddles. I skipped through its dialogue until I was given the option to choose my answer to his riddle. I quickly read the riddle and gave the answer of a monster, at the last second. This ended up being incorrect, however. I still received a Trinity key. I wasn't sure what this would be used for as of yet, so I continued on. There ended up being quite a few difficult puppets in chapter 3. one of which was a puppet that wielded 2 shields. I have no idea what this guy did for a job, but I can't imagine it was too helpful. This puppet was difficult to fight because whenever it had both shields up, you couldn't do any damage from the front, and it proved to be hard to hit it from behind. Another puppet was the Puppet of the Future. This was mainly because it did lots of damage and was in a pool of corruption, which if fully proc would damage me. The Puppet of the Future also did shock damage, which made it so my pulse cells would do less healing. Eventually, I gave up on fighting this puppet, but I did return back later and defeat it after removing the corruption from the floor. Eventually, I'd pull a lever that would connect 2 red pipes together. I would also run into 2 characters called Red Fox and Black Cat. These guys would show up a few more times throughout the game, but in the end wouldn't do too much. I also found a door with a triangle on it. This triangle was used to indicate doors that my Trinity keys could unlock. They would usually contain better gear for Pinocchio to use. In this case, I got a new outfit and a quartz. Nothing else really happened in this chapter, besides me finding a survivor that, like always, once they realized I was a puppet, decided to attack me, so I defeated him and moved on. Just before the boss fight, I'd run into Benigni, who was the owner of the factory. We had a quick conversation and I headed to the boss fight. Once I had made it to the boss room door, I flung it open and entered. The furnace in the room turned into a giant puppet and the fight began. The King's Flame Furnace boss fight can be a little bit difficult until you get the hang of it. Unlike the previous boss fights, the furnace had a cannon on one of its arms it uses to shoot fireballs at you. These fireballs are great at tracking you, making it better to dodge them than block them. The other attack that can be an issue is where it charges up its furnace and then incinerates the entire arena. The only way to dodge this attack is to get behind one of the pillars in the arena, so that when the fire spreads, it doesn't get you. This fight took me a few attempts, as not only was I learning the boss's moves, I was also trying to figure out the best weapon to use on the boss. My rapier wasn't doing enough damage, but my heavy weapon was just too slow to get damage in. So I used both. I used the rapier to deal damage to the boss with light attacks, and whenever the boss would get staggered or my faith would be fully charged, I would switch to my heavy weapon that dealt way more damage, so I could deal the highest possible damage, and this ended up working and allowing me to defeat the King's Fire Furnace. For defeating it, I received the high-powered Flame Amplifier, King's Flame Ergo, and a Flame Grindstone, all helpful rewards. Before starting chapter 4, I returned to Hotel Krat and spoke with Geppetto. Once done, I went over and chatted with Benigni. After speaking with him, I was now able to equip new effects onto my Grindstone with him. Previously, the Grindstone could only put durability back onto my weapons. Now, I could also use it to imbue my weapon temporarily with certain effects, depending on the Grindstone I was using. This would come in very helpful. I also had a quick chat with Sophia and did some leveling up. Chapter 4 initially starts with you running through and defeating puppets in the puppet mines in Benigni's workshop, until eventually you make it to the Moonlight Town. During my time in Moonlight Town, I cut down anything and everything in my path, like usual, until meeting the Atone. She tells me about the cathedral and asks me if I'm a stalker. I answer with yes, and in return, she gave me the cable railway key. This allowed me to use the cable car to go up to the cathedral, so I hopped in the cable car and headed up. Once up the mountain, I'd make my way to the St. Frangelico Cathedral Chapel. I'd hit the Stargazer, and here I'd get to see what would be the final boss, some weird looking creature that would dive into the hole in the ground and disappear. I'd now begin what would be one of the most infuriating sections in this entire game, where I need to work my way all the way up a bunch of ladders, but to get to each ladder, you would need to cross little wooden planks whilst having enemies attack you and try to knock you off. This ended up causing a lot of rage. Yep, just drop me off the edge. Why not? Why? How does that make any fucking sense? And even after finally making it to the top of the building, I still had to battle a creature that did tons of damage and just clapped me every time I challenged it. And this would be where yet again, another rage cycle would begin, of climbing the tower and getting clapped by the creature until finally I managed to defeat it, being rewarded with one goddamn fucking quartz. By the way, before you go, couldn't you just run past the creature? No, I fucking couldn't, because the creators decided that to unlock the door to progress, you need to defeat that stupid creature and just get your ass absolutely destroyed before you can progress. But it's okay. Deep breaths. Breathe it. It's all over now. I continue to press through the cathedral until running into a character named Aladoro. He asked me if I knew of anywhere safe. I decided to lie to him to keep the hotel secret for now. I kept moving until finally making it to the boss room. The fight with the fallen Archbishop Andreas is in my opinion one of the easier fights in Lies of P. I say this because as long as you can master the few moves in its first phase, you're set. This boss primarily uses swing and strike attacks with tongue and up, but the boss also gives off movement tells just before it attacks, allowing you to be able to block or dodge the incoming attack. Even though I failed my first attempt at the boss, I was really confident I could beat this boss. Eventually, I managed to cut all of the boss's health down. I thought I was done, but I was wrong. Because this boss had a second phase, but this time, it would change form and have a cutscene to go with it. You would now get to see the physical form of the Archbishop. Now remember how I said if you could master the first phase of the move, you were set? This is because, in this fight, if you can get behind the Archbishop, you end up just facing off with the first phase boss attached to the back of the Bishop. This allows you to pretty much ignore the Archbishop's attacks and focus entirely on the moveset you already know. I explored this knowledge, and in the end, it's what allowed me to defeat the fallen Archbishop. For defeating the Archbishop, I received the Twisted Angel's Ergo. Before moving on to chapter 5, I decided to go and level up at Sophia, unlock some new P organs near Geppetto, and go and speak with Vidigni. After that, I carried on to chapter 5. I'd start chapter 5 at the Archbishop's altar. I'd take a lift and end up at the Path of the Pilgrim. Here I'd run into humans and animals that had been infected by Ergo. The first challenging enemy I wasn't ready for was what looked to be a bear that had been infected by Ergo. Because I wasn't ready for this creature when I first ran into it, it destroyed me. But the second time, I was ready and defeated it. After the bear though, not a lot happened. I just dodged bear traps and fought more infected creatures until making it to the Tomb Slums entrance. In the slums, there was a large infected creature that broke through the wall and started to attack me. Because I wasn't ready for this, I ended up dying. Whilst returning to this creature, I decided my best option was going to be to run past as many enemies as I could to save as many pulse cells as possible for the fight. Before challenging the creature again, I also activated my grindstone effect. With all of this, I managed to defeat the creature. Eventually, I made it to what looked like a castle-style entrance. I could clearly see a large enemy being stopped by the gate. I decided to head back to my Stargazer, get all of my pulse cells back, and then return back to the castle to fight the creature. Turns out, I overestimated its abilities and I destroyed the creature. I worked my way through a bit of the castle until I ran into Red Fox and Black Cat again. They asked me for help, working their way through the Black Rabbit's territory. I agreed to help. This ended up with myself, Red Fox, and Black Cat just running through alleyways and buildings, defeating infected, until all of a sudden, Black Cat was out of breath and needed a break. How convenient. I pushed on, fighting my way through more infected and grabbing more loot until I ran into another one of those ringing phones. I picked it up, and the Master of Riddles asked me another question. I responded with Candle as my answer, and it was correct, so I received another Trinity key. After a lot more senseless running around, I unlocked a shortcut door to the closest Stargazer and headed over to the entrance of the boss arena. This boss fight gets challenging for one reason and one reason only, and that is because throughout the fight with the eldest brother of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, the other siblings join in on the fight, so throughout this fight it usually ends up being a 2v1. Thankfully however, when the siblings jump in, they're not that hard to get rid of. The part I struggled with was having enough heals to finish off the eldest brother. Because I was struggling so much, I decided to use thermites that I had acquired whilst running around the chapter. These would allow me to damage the eldest brother from a distance, hopefully giving me the slight edge I needed. With every thermite thrown at him, more and more damage was inflicted, and this ended up going from a fairly difficult fight to really easy. Now if you're upset that I didn't talk much about the siblings, don't worry, they'll be making a return later on. For defeating the eldest brother, I received a Pleasant Ergo Chunk and Taunt emote. After defeating the eldest brother, I pushed forward and eventually ran to this guy named Daajjeey. He wanted a gold coin for fruit, but walked outside and was introduced to the gold coin tree. This tree would allow me to grab gold coins off of it, which I could then use to reset my P organs and levels. This tree also just happened to connect onto the back of Hotel Crap. Before moving on to the next chapter, I went and had a quick little chat with Geppetto, upgraded my P organs, and had a chat with Antonia, who gave me the Rosa Isabella Street entrance key. I also returned to the Union entrance in chapter 3 and went and spoke with Alidoro. He complained that I had lied to him about where a safe area was, and this time I decided to tell him about the hotel. This would end up coming back to bite me on the ass later on, but I wasn't aware of that right now. I'm back to the Hotel Crap and found Alidoro there. Here I was able to give him the Ergo I had received from defeating the bosses and could unlock boss weapons and other little goodies. Once done, I decided it was finally time to dive into chapter 6. Chapter 6 is one of the shorter chapters in my opinion. You start on Rosa Isabella Street. I worked my way through buildings and other streets, destroying all puppets that were in my way, until I noticed what looked like a performing area with a puppet spinning in the middle of it. I went over and interacted with this puppet, and it spoke. At least, that's what I thought, until this lady dropped down from the sky and destroyed the puppet. This would be another mini-boss battle, this time with a human called the White Woman. Not only was she agile, she also did quite a lot of damage. I found it hard to find openings to damage her in. Thankfully, I eventually managed to figure out little openings I could attack her in, but it still meant that this fight ended up being a pretty drawn out fight, where I had to be patient so I wouldn't get destroyed too quick. After beating the White Woman, the rest of the chapter was primarily a lot of running around through sewers, streets, and buildings, defeating puppets, until I ran into what would be my next difficult fight before the boss. This would be the Mad Clown puppet fight. Now this puppet isn't that hard to beat, but I did fuck all damage, and for some reason, I just couldn't get the blocking timing down correct, which led to quite a few deaths. Eventually, I decided to just run past the Mad Clown. Right behind the Mad Clown just happened to be a Stargazer, so I activated and went back, time and time again to challenge the Mad Clown, until I finally managed to defeat it and get rewarded with a quartz. With the clown defeated, I headed into the mansion in front of me. Not a lot happened here. The puppets inside could cause disruption, which if I let build up would instantly kill me. I gave some woman an apple, and I found another room where I could use my Trinity key. Eventually though, I made it to the boss room. I was now up to the chapter 6 boss, the King of Puppets. I'd spend the next 3.5 hours fighting this boss. First part of the King of Puppets fight is pretty easy, once you get the hang of it. Throwables do lots of damage to him, and when you learn the signals for what attacks you can keep fighting through, and which ones you need to move away from him, it becomes a very simple phase 1. But phase 2, phase 2 is hell. Not only is the boss more nimble, he does loads of damage, but that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is where the King of Puppets decides to set his sword on fire. Even at max HP, if I got caught in this combo attack, I died. I tried everything, dodging backwards a lot, trying to get perfect blocks, but nothing was working. Until I found a helpful tip on Reddit that said, if I just keep dodging left, he won't be able to hit me. At least, not as often. This was the saving grace I needed. I used this newfound information, and the tides of battle had shifted. With that one singular tip, I finally managed to defeat the King of Puppets. It was still really close, but I managed to do it. For defeating the King of Puppets, I received the burnt white King's Ergo, an outfit, and someone's necklace. I headed over, hit the Stargazer, and returned to the Hotel Crab. Chapter 7 starts in Essel Opera House stage. I run out the back exit and run to Geppetto. Him and I have a chat. After our chat, I kept moving. All the puppets in the street now looked really depressed. They wouldn't get up and try to fight me unless I got close to them. It was really strange. Eventually, after running around the streets for a while and killing off a lot of puppets, I ended up in a place called Lorenzini Arcade. I killed off some of the infected people and hit the Stargazer nearby. I moved on, and whilst I was running around trying to figure out where to go, I found the Lorenzini Arcade first floor key. Eventually, I found the gate the key was for, and I kept pushing forward. It seemed that this chapter was going to be a lot of running down corridors, doing not a lot of anything, and I was right. I spent what felt like an eternity running around, killing infected just to find keys to get out of the place. Eventually, I found the arcade underground passage key, and yet again, I kept going. I fought a clown puppet that did massive damage, but thankfully, I managed to defeat it. And then I finally managed to find the exit to these underground chambers, but the chapter wasn't over yet. Even though I had finally made it to the Grand Exhibition Plaza, the curse of a boring Chapter 7 continued, with me running around, fighting off more puppets, and eventually making it into the Grand Exhibition. But if you thought it got better here, it didn't. The only interesting thing that happened before the boss fight was that I ran into another ringing telephone. I picked it up and get asked what cannot be used before it breaks. I answer with egg and get it correct. I received the King of Riddles hint. I never really knew what this was for, to be honest. Not long after this, I finally made it to the boss room. The Chapter 7 boss fight is with Champion Victor. To be quite honest, this fight is really easy. Probably the easiest boss fight in the entire game. That is due to the fact that Victor doesn't actually deal a lot of damage, and most of his attacks are easy to either dodge or block. His phase 1, he spends most of the time chasing you around, doing 3-hit combos, but nothing that will kill you. The only deadly part about phase 1 is that he does a lot of unblockables, which can make it a little bit tricky. Phase 2, nothing really changes at all. All he does is power himself up with the ergo on his back and continue to do slow swinging attacks. This allows for this fight to be a nice breath of fresh air after fighting the King of Puppets. In the end, I finished Victor off with 2 thermites to the face. After defeating Victor, we get introduced to Simon Manus, the apparent final boss of the game. He talks to us for a bit and then leaves, and with chapter 7 now finished, I'd activate the Stargazer and head back to Hotel Krat. At Hotel Krat, I spoke to Eugenie, who gave me a 4-finger glove. Then I went over to Polendina, where he talked about a cure for Antonia. I then went over to Daajjeey and gave him a gold coin fruit from the tree, and in return he gave me an antidote for Antonia's diseases. But it wasn't guaranteed to work. I then went back to Polendina and gave him the antidote and would now finally be able to continue with the chapters. Chapter 8 starts in the Grand Exhibition conference room. After running further through the building, I ran to Red Fox and Black Cat. I chatted with them, then got on the tram and carried on my way. The tram would drop me off at the Barren Swamp tram station. Eventually, after a bit of running, I'd run into another angry clown, but this one would activate electric shock on me. Just like the previous clown, I struggled here, but eventually I managed to defeat it thankfully. After a while, I ran into Alidoro again. I gave him the 4-finger glove, but he said he didn't remember Eugenie. Weird. But oh well. I moved on and eventually ran into this broken puppet. It was talking about not wanting to kill humans and it wasn't controlled by the Grand Covenant, but it wanted to learn emotions. I'd return back to this puppet throughout the game and teach it emotions. I ended up running into this cool area that had 2 puppets of the future. I decided that I wanted to take both of these guys out because they'd both give me a quartz, and with me getting deeper into the game, the more I could upgrade my pit organs, the better. So I took out the first one and then lured the second one into a safe area where it would just be me and the puppet, and I destroyed the second one. As well in the same area, I also found a human survivor that was so happy to see me that they just happened to slip and hit their head and die. Like, what are the chances, really? After working my way up a slope with giant flying puppet balls trying to hit me, I'd now need to fight some puppet child that learnt its evasive techniques from the Navy SEALs. Fighting this guy took me a few attempts, but once I got good at blocking his evasive techniques, I managed to defeat it. After some travel, I ran into the rookie explorer, Hugo. I talked to him for a bit, and then went and hit the Stargazer nearby. I was now up to Chapter 8's boss fight. The Green Monster of the Swamp fight was terrible, to say the least. I did not enjoy this fight at all. Not only is it yet again another 2-phase boss fight, this guy hit me harder than I hit one of my monitors after challenging this guy for the 50th time. And also activated Decay with every attack. This fight was just hell. Phase 1 was hard to get through. From the charge attacks, to the unblockables, to the slam attack combos, it felt almost impossible, but little did I know what was yet to come. Once I got into phase 2, it only got worse. The creature would take over the shell of a puppet, and now do even longer combos, hit even harder, and could swap between its phase 1 form and phase 2 form. This meant that not only was I constantly needing to change my playstyle, I always had to be ready for this boss to either do an unblockable or try to hunt me down in the smallest boss fight map ever. Eventually, I managed to defeat the boss, and I'd be rewarded with the Puppet Devouring Green Hunter's Ergo and Golden Ergo. To be honest, not worth the rage I just went through, but that's okay. It was done. I hit the Stargazer and had a quick chat with Alidoro, and then headed to Hotel Krat. Back at Hotel Krat, I went and spoke to Antonia and played the piano for her. I then ran over and spoke with Benigni. I also had a quick chat with Alidoro and then started chapter 9. Like always, I started the chapter where I had just defeated the previous boss. I worked my way through some tunnels, fighting puppets until I ended up back at Krat Central Station. To be honest, most of my time spent in Krat Central Station was spent running around just trying to find where to go. There were corrupted creatures everywhere, and all the paths felt like they just kept leading to nowhere. Eventually, I did run into this massive corrupted creature, which I was a bit worried at first. I used my grindstone on my blade and just went in, and it got a pretty solid attack combo and ended up killing it really easily. I did also run into another survivor. This one took me a few attempts because I attacked so slow. I couldn't use charge attacks to stun, so I found the best way of dealing damage was to just dodge or block their attack and then hit back. This allowed for me to do decent damage and slowly pick away at their health until they died. Eventually, after a while of running the same course I ran in chapter 1, I managed to get out of Krat Central Station and into Krat Central Station Plaza. I fought off some infected creatures and continued to work my way back through the starting streets of Krat. It was really odd seeing the areas I had already gone through so long ago again. Eventually, I made it to the part of Krat called Collapsing Krat. It seemed that the ergo in this world was causing Krat to tear itself apart with stuff flying in the air. Besides for the flying objects, there wasn't much new here. I fought my way through, continuing on with my quest to find the boss fight. However, before I could get to the final boss fight, I would need to fight another threat. This one was called the Walker of Illusions. This fight was tough, and I got really mad at it. Not only does this mean boss do loads of unblockables, it also just keeps swinging, making it really hard for you to get any solid damage in. At a certain point in this fight, the mini boss creates an illusion of itself, so it now goes from a 1v1 to a 2v1. Thankfully, however, the illusion is far weaker than the original. After changing weapons, and almost putting a hole through one of my monitors, I finally managed to defeat the Walker of Illusions. After that traumatic experience, I kept pushing forward, only stopping to quickly answer one of the Riddle Master's riddles. But not too far away from the phone would be the boss room. It was the same arena where I had versed the first boss. The Crab Parade Master was a fight I was expecting to be much harder than it was. Not only were the attacks an almost exact replica of the Parade Master's original attacks, the only new feature was the fact that because the boss was corrupted, it procced Plague, but not enough to really have me worried. After versing the previous mini-boss, this fight was a breath of fresh air, and I managed to defeat the Corrupt Parade Master on my 4th attempt. For defeating it, I'd receive a quartz and full moonstone. I now sprint up to the main doors to Hotel Krat and enter.
The fox, the cat.
Once I entered Hotel Krat, I discovered the place in shambles. Turns out the Black Rabbit Brotherhood had ransacked the place and kidnapped Geppetto. Sophia told me to talk to Antonia about a secret passageway I could use to leave the hotel safely. I ended up to Geppetto's room and found everyone locked inside with the door barricade to stop the Brotherhood from getting in. I spoke to everyone and continued on. Antonia told me about a secret pathway out of the hotel. As long as I played the correct piano keys, that's exactly what I did. And the secret pathway opened up. I'd now finally be able to start chapter 10. Chapter 10 has you start at the Relic of Trisgetsu entrance. I think I pronounced that correct. To be honest, this is easily the shortest chapter in the entire game. You spend the entire time running through the caves, fighting puppets and corrupted in your way, and then after about 10 minutes of searching, you find the boss room. I was really disappointed with this chapter, to be quite honest, because I felt like it was a really rushed chapter, and didn't have as much depth as the other chapters, but oh well. Like I said, I ended up making it to the boss fight room after about 10 minutes of searching. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood fight is very intimidating at first. I say this because it is literally a 3v1, and last I checked, those are terrible odds. Not only were the numbers stacked against me, each rabbit had an ability, from putting electricity on their weapon, to fire, to even just being super quick. I had my work cut out for me. More often than not, they would attack one at a time. This allowed for openings where I could get some solid counterattacks in. This would be the strategy I'd mainly use for the fight. Even though this meant the fight would be drawn out and take longer than expected, it also meant that my odds of spell had gone up. Way up. Nothing else really changed throughout this fight. That was until I got to the second phase of the boss. Once you're down to the final rabbit, the elder brother comes back from the dead. Now not only do you need to defeat the final rabbit, but you also need to beat the reanimated elder brother. This was not easy. The elder brother had a brand new moveset, and with how aggressive he was, it made it really hard to get any damage into the final rabbit or him. This led to my downfall, but with each failed attempt, I learnt new strategies and had new ideas. One of my ideas was to kill off the first rabbit and then get both of the remaining ones really low. This meant that whilst the other brother was spawning in, I could quickly finish off the remaining rabbit, making it back to a 1v1. This ended up being a great idea, and in the end, it led to my victory over the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. For defeating them, I received a singular quartz and then returned back to Hotel Krat. Back at Hotel Krat, I went over and talked with Venigni. He got me to listen to something. It was an audio logged from the King of Puppets. It spoke of the Law Zero, which was all the puppets must listen to their creator, Geppetto. Venigni asked me if I heard anything. I said no. None of this was adding up. Why would Geppetto do this? Oh well, I had no time to dwindle on it. There was still so much to do, and after my conversation with Venigni, I began chapter 11, the final chapter. Chapter 11 is a massive chapter, so I'm only going to talk about the important and interesting things. I ran into Aldoro and found out he sold out Hotel Krat. I also found out that he isn't actually Aldoro, but Aldoro's old partner. I decided for his crimes committed against the hotel, he must die, so I killed him and then hopped into a submarine and head to the Black Sea side. Here we find out that Sophia we have been seeing is actually just an image created by her control over Ergo, that she wants us to come and free her from her suffering. I pushed my way into the building, further down the seaside, and ended up killing a door guardian, allowing me to continue. I kept pushing on, working my way further and further into the building, moving up floors, trying to make it to the top. There weren't really any hard enemies, allowing for it to be a pretty simple run. I did, however, end up finding the King of Riddles, mangled and torn up against a wall. He asked me one last riddle before dying. He asked me if I was a puppet or a human. I quickly responded with human, making him ecstatic. I then kept pushing my way further up the tower until I finally came face to face with my first real boss of chapter 11. The Laxatia, the complete fight, is one of the hardest, if not the hardest boss fight in the entire game. This isn't due to the fact that she does so much damage, though this is a contributing factor. It's due to her second phase, but more on that shortly. Phase 1 is pretty simple. She does some heavy swing attacks and some unblockables, but nothing too hard, though I did notice in my first attempt that I was doing no damage at all. Her health was going down so slowly, it felt like I was beating a tank with a piece of my ass hair. Even though I was doing no damage, I managed to push her into her second phase. Here, she now becomes the thickest boss I've ever faced, and somehow, even with all that cake, she still manages to move around at the speed of lightning. She now hit hard and fast, making it impossible for me to block her, and this ended up being my demise. After about 2 more hours of me having my ass handed to me, I finally decided to do some research. I found out that Laxatia is weak to acid, and also if I use the perfect block grindstone, I'd be able to launch her lightning bolts back at her and even block her first unblockable at the start, allowing me to do loads of damage to her second phase. This is exactly what I did. I put on a weapon that procced acid damage and used the perfect grindstone, and this worked perfectly, allowing me to get loads of damage in. Even though I still failed a few times, I got more and more used to her attack patterns, allowing for me to start blocking her attacks, and in the end, I finally managed to take her down, after almost 4 hours of pain and suffering. Before defeating her, I received the sad zealot's Ergo, and then returned back to Hotel Krat, spoke to some people, and returned back to the tower to continue climbing my way up towards the next boss. On my way up, I found the real Sophia, corrupted by Ergo and wishing for death. I decided to give her peace so she could finally rest. After climbing all the way to the top of the tower, I finally made it to the boss arena. The Simon Manus fight was actually way easier than the Laxatia fight. This was due to Simon's slow attacks. His first phase primarily focused on long swinging and slam attacks, but some of these attacks just left enough room that if you got really close to him, they wouldn't hit you. He also just happened to be weak to acid as well, making it perfect for the weapon I was using. Eventually, after doing enough damage, I pushed him into phase 2. This phase was a bit more difficult. Not only was his damage increased, he also now could cause disruption with some of his attacks. But in the end, the moveset was still the same, and was just as easy to read and predictable. I did fail a few times, but in the end, I decided that it might be a good idea to bring in some thermites with me, and once he was low enough on health, just keep my distance and finish him off with them. This ended up working amazing, allowing me to defeat Simon Manus. For defeating Simon Manus, I received the Arm of God and the Fallen One's Ergo. With Simon defeated, I took the lift down into an underground area where Geppetto was waiting for me. He talked with me and told me how proud he was, and then said he could turn me into a real boy, but only if I gave him my heart. Well, I refused. He was not happy with that, so I ended up pulling out a puppet from a case, and here is where the final boss fight would begin. The Nameless Puppet fight is another boss fight that starts off easy but gets way harder in the second phase. In phase 1, all you really need to do is block his attacks and strike back in the gaps the puppet leaves, massive openings, and primarily does swing attack. He does small twitches before attacking, allowing me to know when I need to block, but the second phase was a whole other story. Not only was the puppet way quicker now, it also would dual blade and do loads of unblockables. Some of these attacks just did so much damage that it felt useless to try and fight back. After a few failed attempts, I thought about my loadout and what I could possibly use to make life a little bit easier. I put the perfect block grindstone back on and decided I'd use this in the second phase. This would allow me to stun the boss by blocking its attacks and would also mean I didn't need to worry about unblockables, as long as the grindstone was active. This made it so now my opportunities to attack had greatly increased. Now I was able to not need to worry about dodging this. This ended up leading to me defeating the Nameless Puppet. puppet knocked me down and was about to finish me off until Geppetto jumped in front of its blade. Not to save me though, but to save my heart. This gave me the opportunity to finish the nameless puppet off. As I held Geppetto in my arms, he let out a tear and said he was sorry and called me his son. After this was done, I went over to a puppet and put my ergo inside it, causing Sophia to come back to life, and for me to become a real boy. Now it's time for the review. In my opinion, Lies of P isn't the next great Soulslike. Now, before you get mad at me, hear me out. Throughout my time playing Lies of P, I had a few constant issues that made the game either boring or just really frustrating. The first one of these was the dodge mechanic. Usually in most Souls-like games, the dodge mechanic acts as a way to dodge through enemy attacks and not take damage. In Lies of P, it felt like the dodge was rushed. Sometimes it would work, other times it wouldn't. The dodge just wasn't consistent, causing me to become extremely frustrated with it. The second reason was the gameplay. Even though Lies of P carries an amazing storyline with loads of different characters, it felt that it was just so repetitive. You'd meet someone, run through tunnels of the city, defeating small puppets until finally making it to the boss fight. There wasn't any real side quests or extra little adventures you could do, and even though this streamlines the game, it makes it so that no matter what, you are always just stuck fighting the same enemies over and over again and running the same path over and over again, making the replayability of this game pretty low, as the only real way to change the game up is by changing what build you use, and that even has its limitations, or by changing what answers you gave to the questions you were asked. My final reason is that most of the boss fights felt copy and pasted from all of them, primarily doing swing attacks, to the fact that after you witness the first boss transition into phase 2, every boss afterwards does the exact same thing. It made it so there was no surprise about what was going to happen. Next, killing all sense of suspense and tension. This just made it feel like, to me personally, that after they did it to one boss, they just got bored and said, fuck it, why not do it to all of them? Now, I want to finish up by saying, by no means am I saying this game is terrible. To be honest, it's quite the opposite. If you can look past all the little flaws in the game, you get to see the real great parts of the game. From the unique weapon system allowing you to mix and match weapons, to the captivating story which lets you choose how the game is going to end, adding the butterfly effect into the game. All of these cool little details are sometimes what just happens to make the game, and in Lies of P's case, I definitely think these few little details is what makes the game stand out from other Souls-like. But remember, this is all my opinion. I recommend trying the game for yourself and forming your own opinions on it. If you end up enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot and I really appreciate it. And consider watching the video that's up on your screen right now.